Welcome back to the Growth Nexus podcast. Today's episode features an incredible guest, Sienna Brown, a leadership coach, impact entrepreneur, and VP of growth at PowerToFly. Sienna brings a powerful perspective on what it means to lead with intention in today's fast-changing world of work. From scaling inclusive growth inside global organizations to helping leaders find more clarity and balance, Sienna's mission centers on creating work cultures that prioritize people without compromising results. In this conversation, we get into the real challenges of remote work, the shift towards a people-first leadership, and how leaders can build environments where purpose and performance go hand in hand. We also talk through how redefining success with clarity and boundaries and small but intentional choices can open the door to more sustainable impact. So whether you're leading a team, running a business, or just looking to align your work with your values, this episode will give you plenty to think about. What's up, and welcome back to the Growth Nexus podcast. I'm very excited today to have with us Sienna Brown. She works for a company called PowerToFly, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself and a little bit about what she does there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. And I'm really happy to be here and for all of you who are listening. So I am currently the VP of growth at PowerToFly, which is an organization that connects top talent to companies that care. And so really focusing on how can we think about this, especially in the world of remote work, living in a global workforce. And then on a personal note, I work personally with companies as well as individuals to really think about how can we create more space for presence, purpose, and people-first leadership without compromising performance or impact so that everyone really has an opportunity to thrive.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I really enjoyed our first conversation. We were just, kind of diving into some of those different topics, and it's not just about filling a seat, but really finding people to help move your organization forward while also, creating some level of fulfillment. I think one of the, I think we learned this, even it got accelerated in kind of the pandemic situation as so many people went remote. People didn't really understand how to leverage some of these tools, technologies, still stay connected and have like a deeper meaning in their work. And sadly, a lot of people found themselves in dealing with a lot of, depression and mental illness, and just even if it wasn't that level, it was just a disconnect. So tell me a little bit about, how you guys handled like modern workforce, right? Where so many people are moving virtual. Some of us may have been doing, I always tell people, we were virtual before it was cool. But, how do you help maybe people who are currently in that space figuring it out, maybe people moving into that space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's really relevant. So for me personally, I've actually been remote, quote unquote, if you're not watching via video for over a decade, right?
Yeah.
So like what you were saying, virtual before it was something that was cool. And something that I think is really interesting, having seen especially the trends over the last 10 years, is that specifically with organizations and people, there's two different stories that kind of happen. I think with organizations, something that we saw over time was a lot of folks being in office, a lot of organizations having office spaces, and that kind of being seen as the place to connect and grow with your coworkers. And then over time, specifically during the pandemic and then after the pandemic, we're seeing a little bit more trends of not just how are we working remotely, but how are we understanding the definition of what does that mean and how can we work remotely while still being able to reach our business objectives, which every CEO and organization wants to do, but then also being able to honor what the lived realities look like for a lot of our individuals. So for example, working remotely for someone who is in their early 20s living in San Francisco versus, let's say, a working mother living in India looks very different based on time zone, based on responsibilities. And so I think something that's really interesting is that organizations also had to learn and understand what does flexibility mean for each individual for them to also be able to live their life and have their responsibilities, but then also how do individuals work best? And so we've actually seen that individuals who are working remotely are actually more productive, more motivated, and able to do better work because they have that flexibility. Yet we're seeing, especially I think in the last couple of years, a lot of offices wanting to go hybrid or go back in office. And so you're seeing a little bit of disconnect of what talent actually wants in the workplace versus what organizations are doing. And so to answer your original question, what I would say is for folks that are either just getting started in remote work or whatnot, I think something that's really important to think about is how do you do your best work? and
Yeah.
what do you need to be able to do your best work, because that really differs across locations, across roles, and also across responsibilities as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's the one, obviously understanding that. And I think I've talked to a number of people about this, like realizing that we as individuals actually have choices.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself of that so often, right? Like I think like, well, no, this is what I do, but like that's not, I don't have to do this. I could say,
Mm,
I could quit today and go do something else. Like I could, I
yeah.
have that choice. So like laying those like musts and those desires out is really important. So then you can find that flexibility. So like for me, one of my big things when I decided to take this on full time, my agency work and my consulting work, I have a hard stop at 4:30. That's a must. Why? Because I have two growing boys. They're active and they need time to hang out with dad.
Yeah.
And I know if I don't do that, I can just keep working because I like what I do. So like creating those parameters and having flexibility in my job and telling my clients, I'm there for you 7 a.m. I'll be even there earlier if needed, but I'm done at
Mm.
4:30. If you need me after that, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And sometimes that works great, and for some people it doesn't work great, and that's okay. And it does it's not a fit, and that's fine.
But I love, sorry, really quickly, Ryan, but I love what you're saying, because I think a lot of times we forget the agency that we have.
Mm,
And a lot of times we almost get so caught up in the work that we do or how we want to be viewed that we forget our values. And I think what you're talking about is so important, because something that I actually do in the coaching work that I do is that it's working on individuals to understand, what are your core values? What does your ideal week look like? Not just within the constraints of work, but also,
yeah,
when do you need to wake up? Maybe you're not in the 5 a.m. club. Maybe for you, it's getting started with your day at 9 or 10 a.m. When do you do your best focus work? When is it better for you to take meetings? And I think what you were talking about in regards to also being able to create those boundaries in that container to also guide the way that you work with other individuals. And I think I'll just share a quick story. But something that's so important is that oftentimes it catches on more than you think. So sometimes
mhm,
people hear themselves because they say, I don't want to seem inaccessible, or I have to abide by what my organization or my team or my clients need. And something that I actually saw is, in a lot of the work that I do, I'm very big on not just time management, but energy management. And so I have deep work blocks on my calendar. And at first, I did a little bit of self work of, how will this be viewed? How will this be perceived? And something that I saw over time, especially as a leader, is that other individuals, number one, respected it. And number two, said, this is inspiring. And so little by little, you started seeing deep work blocks on other individuals' calendars. And it's almost like, by leading with intention, you almost start shifting cultures as well, whether you're an entrepreneur, working in an organization, or leading a team. So just a
yeah.
small caveat, it's so important.
No, I mean, it's so true. It's again like people almost feel like they need permission to make those choices, and when someone
Yeah.
does it for, it's hard to be the first one, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool because yeah, when you say no, this is important to me. And I think too, when you have the boundary there, it actually is a really good for communication because then people do know when you're there and when you're not there.
Yeah.
I'll even slack. So I'll slack my teams. Like sometimes I'll pick up something like in the weekend night and it just comes to my head. Um,
Mm.
but we have a standing rule. You don't answer. You don't have to answer anything on the weekends.
Yeah.
But I always make sure to say, this can wait till Monday. I just had to get it out so we
Yeah.
can talk about it so I don't forget. But trying to give that team. So even from like, so an individual, I like that. But as a leader of an organization, I've also found that flexibility is very important for my team. Some of them have young children, some of them have older children, some of them don't have children at all. So what do they need in
Yeah.
order to be successful? And it's not perfect, but we have an open door policy. So like they can come to me and we can talk through it and say, or, I'm not going to be here for this, and my rule has always been, you're getting paid for, X amount of work. This is your salary. You do it in half the amount of time and you take the rest of the time and go have fun or learn or do something else. Good for you. Like as long as we're moving forward, like let's have flexibility and figure this out together. And it takes time, and it takes time to be like, all right, where we've had to say, we used to just kind of like have a free flow, and then we kind of were like, if you could just give us some ballparks of when you're going to be there, so we know when to expect
Yeah,
communication. Again, it's setting those right boundaries so that communication is clarified. So
exactly.
it's been a process, for sure.
Yeah,
But I love that how you just kind of just by doing what you do, it gave permission to those around you to go, I can do that too. And in fact, I like to do that. That's important to me. I think
yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback. I'm loving this conversation. And for those of you who are listening, I'll also give a quick tip or tool or something that's worked for me
Yeah.
over the years as well. So let's say that you are, whether you're just starting a team, you've been running a team within your own company or organization or whatnot. Something that's really interesting, and Ryan, you were talking about this, is creating a survey, right? When you're thinking about culture, flexibility, when you best work, et cetera, and creating a very simple survey that you send out to your team, asking questions around not just what are your preferred, and I don't like to call them working hours, but like online hours.
Yeah.
So it's almost the opposite. So instead of when will you not be online, it's like when can we expect that you might always be tapped in this way? We can try to schedule meetings during that time. We can try to organize the group during that time as well.
Mm.
And a couple of other things is like, what are the ways that you best learn? Are you a visual person? Are you someone who's big on documentation? What are your best ways in regards to verbal communication as well? Would you rather quick Slack audio, a Slack message, et cetera? And so really being able to create a little bit of a framework based on your organizational culture to then be able to lean in and say, as a leader, here are all of the different profiles and information that I know. How can I now try to create or curate things that will support individual needs and team needs as well? And again, going back to what you were saying, it really allows for people to feel as if you trust them.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but for that trust to be fostered through how do we work together as a group versus just with our individual needs as well.
Yeah, I love that idea. I haven't done like a specific survey like that, but I might have to take that advice too and just see how we can even more optimize. I'm always like, nothing's ever settled. Let's continue to try to optimize. And one of the things I'll say as like a communicator and as a leader, so oftentimes I hear
Mhm.
people say, well, I already told them, you know,
Mm,
and they assume that once it leaves us, that the communication is now on it's up to the here now. But the reality is communication is always the responsibility of the communicator. If somebody doesn't
yeah,
get what you're saying, that's your fault, not theirs.
yeah,
So you've got to find a way, like, like you said, maybe they're visual learner, maybe you need to do a written document, whatever. For me, I like to use quick Loom videos, because I feel
yeah,
like it gives way more context to what I'm asking for.
yeah,
But that constant reminder that it's not up to me, it's up to them. And I'm going to take that survey idea. I think that's a great one. Just it's simple, it's easy. And again, even
yeah,
when you give that survey, you frame it in a way of, I want to make sure that I'm serving you the best that I can. So can you help me serve
100%.
you? Can you help me serve you better? And what a way to feel validated and heard and needed, especially in a world where it's just noise and grind. And it's so easy when whatever we're doing, just to kind of forget that that we're people. I
Yeah,
love technology. I love everything that we're doing with technology, but like technology is supposed to make this better. Like the fact that we're having this conversation today is a great, just a really cool way to use technology to connect with other people. We couldn't sit down in a room together, but we are sitting in a room together. So it's a cool way to build
exactly.
that relationship. So
Yeah, and also using technology to serve the people first philosophy as well, right? And so I'm a big fan of asynchronous work. So even what we're talking about, let's use the survey as an example. Going and expanding beyond the survey and then saying, maybe in our Slack descriptions, we can take the three most important things that we spoke about and add it so anyone would be able to reference and know. Sienna will be online for meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays
mm,
from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., right? Visible, easy for everyone to see. And the other thing that I would say is even thinking about how can you use technology to serve you. So something that I love doing, it's actually funny because some of the folks that I've worked with have been working with me for so long that they now think in the way that I think of like weekly Slack check-ins. How can we automate instead of doing a stand-up meeting for an hour or 30 minutes once a week in Slack, celebrations from last week, top three priorities, important call outs or roadblocks, who you need to collaborate with. And it's a quick, easy way for
Mm,
someone in 3 to 5 minutes to have that insight, see if they can have that conversation asynchronously. And then if not, then we can set up a call. But I think what you were saying, using technology to be able to serve a people first philosophy is something that can help us go so much further, so much faster.
yeah, I love that. So a lot of these things, you're mentioning, I mean, they're really great like touch points. And another thing we talked about was like, especially in the tech world. So I see this a lot. We work in the tech space. Um, a lot of people bounce around to companies, right? So why do people stay in an organization that you guys have seen at Power to Fly and your other work that you do? And then what are some of the reasons that maybe they also leave? Um, yeah, just curious.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. I'll use high level themes, right? So, high level themes of why people leave. Number one, bad leadership, right? So, bad leadership, lack of leadership, and something that we actually see in a trend is that you actually have a lot of leaders or managers who are put there because they're great performers.
Yeah.
And so, what happens is you have great performers who are now leading teams of 10, 15, 20, 200 individuals that are great at what they do, but haven't necessarily taken the time and energy to learn how to be a good leader. And
Mm,
so we've actually seen in a lot of the data that if an individual's leader isn't able to properly lead them, invest in their leadership development as an individual, be able to give them opportunities for them to grow, they'll most likely leave for another organization. Something else that we recently saw in the What Diverse Talent Wants survey, in the What Talent Wants survey that we've been running for the last 5 years, is again going back to flexibility. Am I able to do my best work when I need to do my best work? Because I
mm,
think we're also living in a time where this generation, the generations vary, right? But a lot of folks who are currently in the workforce generation want to work at an organization where they feel like they have purpose. So their purpose is tied, their work is tied to their purpose, and they're able to see how that ties into the bigger organizational goals. They want to be at a place that is aligned with their values. So, do I want to work at this organization? Do I feel as if I would belong? Would I feel proud to tell my friends, my family, my social network that I work at this place? And then the third thing that I would say, which is ironically more than salary, right? More than
right.
compensation, people are willing to leave their organization and role for a place where they feel like is more aligned with their values. And the third thing that we've seen in some of the research and also the organizations that we've worked with is feeling as if there's a lack of opportunity for growth.
Mm,
So I'm here in my role doing the day to day, excuse me, but I don't see room for growth or career progression.
yeah.
And so those are really like the three big themes that I've seen over the last 5 years specifically in regards to why people leave. And
Right.
then why people stay is something similar,
Yeah.
right? So that can be things like I feel valued in my role, and feeling valued means the work that I do has a purpose. I feel supported by my team and my manager and my leader.
Hmm.
I have clear direction on what the company stands for, where we're going, what our OKRs or KPIs are, and how my work is aligned to that. And then also that sentiment of pride and purpose of I want to be working here. And it's interesting just because I think again, we shift between we're living in where talent has kind of, sorry, we're living in a time where talent almost has the ownership of where they want to be working. Then
Right.
that shifts to the organization because now we've seen so many layoffs, we've seen so many company reorganizations that companies are now getting an influx of talent and trying to find the best ones. And so I view it almost as a dance. So in the same way that you might go and interview for an organization at the same time, that talent is also interviewing the organization to say, is this where I want to be? And if you want to be able to attract top talent who will be able to go above and beyond and stay at the organization for a long time, that's what you really need to think.
Mm, that's good. It's got me turning my wheels too. Like I know that like there's a lot that I try to do. We're a smaller team, we're just a smaller company. And one of the things that I feel like we struggle with the most is laying out that career progression path, right? So I genuinely believe, and I think my employees would back me up on this, that They feel valued. They feel connected to the purpose. I know there's a lot of marketing agencies that are just out there looking to churn profit. Like we genuinely work side by side with our clients to solve real world problems. Like that's why we are a small team. We want to be a small team because we want to be more specific in there. But for someone like for us, for smaller, what may be some tips that you've seen even like for like career progression opportunities that we
Yeah.
could feed into them?
I love this. A couple of things I would think about. Number one is understanding the skills that individuals have outside of their current role or JD,
Mm.
right? So let's say, for example, I'm just making this up, but let's say you have a great videographer and video editor who works on the video campaigns. That same individual might also be fantastic at social media strategy and creating content. I don't know your organization, but I'm just picking
Hmm.
this up. They also might be really great based on their past experience or their work outside of work at campaign strategy or creating documentation for scripts, whatever it might be. And so I would ask yourself, or I would ask anyone who's listening, to do some sort of a skills audit to really
Mm.
understand outside of what your day-to-day role is. What are the things, I like to call it your zone of genius, right? A lot of people work in their zone of excellence, but what is your zone of genius? And when you're able to start understanding that, then it will be able to help you say, okay, maybe career progression isn't moving from videographer to senior videographer, right? But maybe it's being able to give them opportunities across departments, or if you're a smaller organization, across projects or initiatives or clients that might be able to help them grow outside of their role in small incrementation. So you're able to see, validate, and then make sure that you're aligned there. But really starting to give small projects where you're able to understand more about, again, going back to the people first philosophy, who are they outside of their day-to-day or their role that we currently view them as, and recognizing that someone who might be currently running your campaigns might also be fantastic at data analysis. Oh, we might have a gap on how are we analyzing the data and ROI for our clients. Perfect. Let's start with a small project and see what that looks like. And so really being able to, again, take a step back and understand from individuals. And there's a lot of really great resources. PowerToFly actually has a skills audit that we use with a lot of our community as well to really be able to understand what are the skills that you have, and then also what are some of the skill gaps of where you would like to be growing.
Yeah.
And so again, I always think about it as hearing from them, because I think oftentimes as a leader, a CEO, an exec in an organization, or even middle managers, there's so much on your plate that you might not necessarily take the time to sit down with all of the individuals and say, where do you want to be going
Yeah.
here or in the future, you know?
No, I had to write that down because I have to check that out. I mean, we I've had a lot of grace in my life, I feel like, because I've been able to
Mm.
accidentally do some of these things.
Yeah.
Um, but that's this being very intentional in it, I think, is what makes it even more powerful.
Yeah.
And seeing somebody and, intuitively going, wow, you got an eye for this. And you got an eye
Mhm.
that really aligns with where I think we should go, and
Yeah.
get more responsibility there. It's not always often we see I'm speaking to myself too right now. Often we see
Yeah.
growth as linear, but really there's there's not much linear in the world, even about growth. If we look at a tree, there are no real trees that just go up. They have branches
Yeah.
that go different directions and they look for different parts of the sun and they weave and they go around and they're growing, but they're growing in multiple directions at one time. And I think that's really cool to kind of think about that as us as well. Like we don't have to just go, manager, VP, senior VP, whatever it is, but like you're growing in a skill set, you're growing in purpose, you're growing in reach, you're growing in knowledge, and
Yeah.
seeking to better yourself. I love that. And I think that all ties again back to what we were talking about before with like, what are your core values as an organization? You know, one of the things I value is learning and constantly learning and
Mhm.
never assuming we know everything.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that helps us with clients too, because they'll come at us and I'm not afraid to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. I'll try to. I don't know. I don't know why that happened, but let's look at it and let's see if we can find a couple reasons. But I think that's really cool. The skills on is that something that is that inside y'all's platform? Is that like a resource that you share out?
Yeah, so it's something that we can share, and I can share the link with you
Awesome.
afterwards, so you can
Yeah.
the description if you want to. And I think just going off of your tree analogy again, the one thing that I would also call out for folks is that I'm a big gardener, so I'm imagining this huge olive
Hmm.
tree that we have in our backyard. And a very important part for the tree to grow is also in Spanish, it's called podando. I can't think of the word in English right now, but like cutting off the branches that no longer serve you, which
Pruning.
also means, thank you. I
Yeah.
was like, I've been living in Spain for 10 years. My brain thinks about the word in
Yeah,
Spanish
yeah,
first. Pruning, right? So in the same way that we have to prune a tree for it to grow and also mold if we want it to go outwards or upwards or
yeah,
whatnot, also thinking about how are we giving the individuals on our team a little bit of extra space, pruning some of the things that might not actually be in their zone of genius, delegating that somewhere else if we can, seeing how we can use AI to be able to help support that so they have time to also see how they can grow,
yeah,
search for what the time is, right? And I think that oftentimes, especially in organizations that want to grow and want to go quickly, it's like, cool, you're doing this role, but then I'm going to give you seven more projects versus, hold on, let's
right.
pause and audit across the board. What do we need to let go of? What might not actually be as beneficial? Where can we be able to use, again, technology to create up time and space
Yeah.
for individuals to grow?
And that's like a perfect use for AI. Like there's there's still so much mysticism around it. AI is nothing new, but with all these buzzwords and all these different tools coming out, and a lot of the tools that coming out actually have no value. Like I get so annoyed. Like I guess everybody's making like a plastic Barbie doll of themselves using AI. I'm like, great. That's costing like millions of dollars, and we're achieving nothing for humanity or each other. But a great use of it is going, what is a repetitive task that doesn't actually need human intervention
Yeah.
that I could get off? I just recently been doing this with myself with some client reporting where I, create an automated workflow to where the end of the month, it compiles all my reports, it sets them up and organizes them for me, and then I have another script that helps me read, analyze, draft my emails. I go check the work, give some analysis, add some personalization as I send it to the client. That's something that would take me days to accomplish that I can now do in an afternoon,
Yeah.
or maybe if it's not AI, maybe it's you look at your process. We just did this recently, and it's like, well, that's a deliverable, and I'm like, what is it? It's not doing anything. It's not working anymore. The algorithms have shifted. We need to stop doing that, and let's use that time to invest in what is working.
Yeah.
So that freed up a lot of time that we were spending on something that just wasn't getting results, and that's okay. Yeah, it's almost like we're afraid to stop doing something because it seems then we have to admit that what we were doing didn't work. But guess what? If it's not working, why are we doing it? you know.
Exactly.
And I love
Exactly.
that pruning analogy because you're right. It gives them space to grow. You're
Yeah.
cutting out that. Well, I love gardening too. We live on a couple acres and got animals and plants and stuff. And when we're pruning, even like, we just had to prune our tomatoes back, right? Because some of the shoots were dying, but they're still sucking life out of the ones that were flourishing. And we had to stop that by pruning them and allowing that life to flow where the growth is actually happening. And the same thing happens in people. It's it's simple when you slow it down and think about it, but we have to do that as leaders, as organization heads, as department managers. But if you're leading people, you have to look at them and say, are they growing the most efficiently for themselves? Like, where do they
Yeah.
feel? And I think this is where your survey comes back in, right? Where do you feel bogged down? Where do you feel like something you're doing maybe not creating the value you think it should? And is there an automated way to do that if it's still valuable? And then if it's not valuable, why don't we just stop and
Yeah.
call it a sunk cost? Oh well, it didn't work. I got to move on.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, I'm loving this conversation just because there's so many core points and topics and themes that we're talking about, but something that you just said that really resonated with me and is also like aligned with my own personal mission and core values is slowing down enough to be able to have that awareness and
Mm,
intention, especially as leaders, business owners, executives, or whatnot, where we live in a society that values the hustle culture and going and doing more, et cetera. And I think something that I've personally learned, especially living in the Spanish culture for the last 10 years and in a lot of my own personal healing, is that when we go slower, we're actually able to have that much more impact. And I
mm,
think that that's something that, and you had spoken about this before, right? But we almost don't value as much as we do, where we say, okay, it's not about how much a person is online, it's about what are you able to produce, at what kind of quality, and in which way that works best for you, and go with it, right? Like we have business objectives, if we're able to reach or meet those, fantastic. But almost thinking about how are we able to slow down enough to actually take a step back and look at the holistic picture through a
Yeah.
strategic lens
Yeah.
versus being in the weeds and being in the business versus working on the business in a
Mm.
more frequent way and like systemize it, right? Something that I do is that I try to twice a year take a think week where I have no meetings. You can't find me. And the only thing that I'm doing is just holistic, strategic work that I don't think about in the day to day.
Yeah.
Like different ways
Yeah.
to think about it and also like
Yeah.
make it a part of the ways of working as well.
Yeah. That's beautiful. When you look back at history and you see some of the great minds, I mean, these people intentionally put themselves in situations to think. And our culture today, especially Western culture, is go, 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 faster, faster, faster. But we're never thinking like you can go really, really fast in the wrong direction. And what you've done is now you've got to backtrack just like, and it's easy to get caught up into that, but to slow down. So like I said, I've got like 2 acres and people are like, why don't you just hire somebody to cut your lawn? I was like, because when I'm sitting on that tractor, I can think. Oftentimes I don't have headphones in. I just think. And the ideas that I'm able to come up with, the problems I'm able to solve, not always work problems. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're relational things. Sometimes they're ideas for my kids and my wife, but I'm giving my brain time to just
Yeah.
desaturate from all the noise and just hear the hum of the motor and focus on a little bit, and I do monthly retreats myself and I go to the beach and I sit there with my vision planner and I say, are these still my goals? Is this still where I want to go in my life? And not only, I don't always want that. Sometimes I was like, that was really fun for last year, but I don't think that's where I'm headed now. And so I make an adjustment. And those big Tony Robbins fan, I've been part of his stuff for years. And he always talks about 2 millimeter shifts. Oftentimes we're in here and we're thinking like, well, I was doing this, now I got to do that. But it's like, it's just a 2 millimeter shift, a little shift at a time. But having those think week, I think that's brilliant. Think week is good. I've been doing one day, and lately I've been like reassessing some of my personal goals and my career goals, and I'm like, I just need time to think,
Yeah. Yeah.
not to get a Slack message, not to get an email, not to do. And when you slow down, like you said, when I come back, I'm like, man, I was so productive. I got everything done before lunch today, you know,
Exactly.
and I wasn't trying to. I just did.
Yeah.
So it's so many nuggets of wisdom in that. So I love that. And the Spanish culture is great. I mean, again, I live in near South Florida, so it's a little bit different, more of a Cuban culture, but you know, uh, lunch is a very important time. Having that siesta, and
Yeah.
having that, and people, like to portray that, at least in the old days, like as laziness. No, there's actually a lot of intention in that.
Yeah.
Especially like so growing up, my dad owned landscaping company, and we cut lawns, and you take a long lunch. Why? Because you've been working your butt off in the sun since 7 a.m. and you got to do it till 4:35 o'clock. So you take that time in the day to rejuvenate and rest, to get your mind ready, your body ready, so you can go back and do the physical labor. There's no difference between labor on a computer and labor in the sun if we think about what's happening in our brains. So why wouldn't we take that time if we need it? I
It's
could talk
so
about
true.
this stuff all day. I love this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was like, oh, me too. I'm having warm and fuzzies over here,
Yeah.
Ryan. No, I think the one other thing that I would add though, and just like for all of you who are listening or watching right now, I think what we're talking about right now might seem very, okay, that'll be nice after I hit this goal, this funding or whatnot. But like, I really want to lean in, and my background lived a lot of different lives. My background is actually in psychology. And so when we think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs of what do we
Mm,
need to get to self-actualization, and that will always evolve, right? Something that I often find is with a lot of high achievers, leaders, entrepreneurs, executives is that oftentimes we're trying to do too much all at the same time.
mm,
And or what I've been seeing in a lot of the research and the work that I've done in my coaching is that we get into this overwhelm and that overwhelm creates inaction. And
mm,
so one of the most important things that I've seen is almost like this framework that I've created is life has a lot of different pillars. It can be family, work, home, career growth, learning, etc., health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, etc. If you're trying to do all 10 things and do all 10 things well, odds are you will not make progress versus saying, and Ryan, you were talking about this, but like, what are the three most important pillars in this season of life?
Mm,
And with those three most important pillars, then being able to understand what is the one thing, goal, intention that I want to focus on, and then how do I get there? And if we take that high level and then we can break that down into what is the KPI if we want to, what are our daily or weekly actions, how do we align that to our calendar? But I think again, it's like you can have a color coded calendar if you want to, but if that's not actually aligned to where you want to be moving into, we almost self-sabotage ourselves by trying to do it all versus saying, where do I need to evolve from experience right now?
yeah.
And often like reframing that of like, you're not starting from scratch if you decide to let go of an idea, a project, an initiative, a client, but you're actually saying, okay, I have this experience. I now want to evolve into something different.
Mm,
What do I need and how can I give myself space to do that in a way that will serve me in the long term?
I love that. And like I said, I could have this conversation all day, but I think that's such an important point that I want to wrap it there and really exclamation point that 4 or 5 times for everybody today. Take that advice, rewatch that part of the video, bookmark the transcript, whatever you need, because that speaks even a lot to me in the season that I'm in right now. So I just want to thank you so much, Sienna, for this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. And I'll make sure to link to everything in below. People can follow you, check out all your stuff, and hopefully we can book some time again to chat because this has been such a great experience for me.
Absolutely. And thank you, Ryan. I mean, it's been an honor. I'm really excited to see this go live. And also, yes, we have to keep the conversation going and
Yeah,
talking about our gardens and we're
yeah,
getting chickens next week. So I think it's great. But also,
yeah,
thank you to everyone who's listening. And I'm really excited to see what are the insights that come from this. So share,
yeah,
comment, let us know because this is how we make change by being able to get
yeah,
those nuggets and then seeing how can we put this into action. So thank
yeah.
you, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll talk soon.